The political world thrives on policy clashes, but sometimes it is the personal moments that cut the deepest and travel the farthest. On August 18th, what began as an otherwise ordinary media appearance turned into a headline storm when Melania Trump, typically known for her careful reserve, let slip a sharp remark about Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Seated on a glossy stage during a panel discussion in New York, Melania was asked about the tone of women in politics. With cameras rolling, she glanced toward a photo of Jasmine shown on a monitor and said with a cold smile, "Some people think shouting makes them important, but really it only makes them look foolish." The audience stirred. The remark was unmistakable. Though she never mentioned Jasmine by name, the implication was crystal clear, and within minutes, social media had seized the clip, pairing it with hashtags that placed Crockett squarely in the line of fire. Journalists quickly fanned the flames, calling it a rare but calculated jab. For years, Melania had cultivated the image of aloof elegance, rarely descending into direct conflict. But here she was, throwing verbal daggers at a rising Democratic star. Networks ran endless loops of the footage, analyzing the smirk, the tone, the deliberate pause before the word foolish. Commentators called it the quiet thunderbolt, a phrase that captured the jarring contrast between Melania's polished exterior and the raw provocation in her words. For Jasmine Crockett, the insult was not just personal, it was political dynamite. Her supporters viewed it as an elitist attempt to silence a woman who dared to speak boldly, a reminder of the double standards women face in public life. Overnight, the story escalated from gossip to a national debate. Was this simply a slip of the tongue, or had Melania declared open season on a younger generation of female politicians? What was undeniable was the impact. By the close of the day, hashtags pairing Jasmine and Melania trended worldwide, with memes, parodies, and fiery commentaries multiplying by the hour. For the first time in years, Melania Trump was not just a former First Lady, she was the antagonist in a fresh and very personal political feud. And for Jasmine, the stage was set to turn insult into opportunity. By the morning of August 19th, the fallout from Melania Trump's pointed remark had already taken on a life of its own. Cable news shows framed it as a culture war moment where class, style, and power collided with authenticity, voice, and defiance. Clips of her statement played on repeat, each network layering on commentary. Was it arrogance or strategy, elitism or accidental candor? For Jasmine Crockett, the insult was like fuel tossed onto an already smoldering fire. Her office released no official comment overnight, but that silence only sharpened public anticipation. Audiences wanted to know how she would respond, and pundits speculated endlessly about the form it might take. Behind the scenes, aides described a congresswoman weighing her words carefully. To strike too softly would make her seem passive. To strike too harshly might reduce her to the same level of pettiness. Yet Jasmine had built her reputation on boldness, on refusing to let others define her narrative. And so the question became not if she would reply, but how. On social media, her supporters filled the gap. They trended the phrase, "foolish." Watch this, posting clips of Jasmine's past speeches, fiery committee hearings, and sound bites that positioned her as a fearless voice. The narrative quickly shifted. Melania's polished barb was being reframed as proof of fear, an attempt by an established figure to undermine a rising challenger. Editorial pages piled on, with some commentators criticizing Melania for punching down, while others applauded her for breaking her silence in a way that felt strangely modern. But it was the tone of the coverage that mattered most. This was no longer about one word. It was about two women symbolizing clashing visions of what leadership should look like. Melania, the restrained former First Lady who rarely raised her voice, and Jasmine, the unapologetically outspoken lawmaker who made volume a virtue. The story carried an electricity that pure policy debates rarely achieved. Viewers sensed stakes that were at once political and deeply personal. By lunchtime, bookings for Jasmine on evening shows were finalized. While Melania's office faced a barrage of press inquiries they chose to leave unanswered. The silence from her side only deepened the intrigue. In every corner of the media landscape, one thing was clear. This feud was not going to fade. It was about to escalate. By early afternoon, Jasmine Crockett finally broke her silence, and the response was nothing short of explosive. Standing before a packed press room in Washington, she wasted no time addressing the remark that had dominated headlines for 24 hours. Looking directly into the cameras, her tone steady but her words razor-sharp, she declared, "I will not be lectured on what a strong woman should sound like, especially by someone whose entire brand was built on silence." The line landed like a thunderclap. Reporters scrambled to transcribe it. Social media lit up instantly, and the phrase became a rallying cry for her supporters. Within minutes, hashtags like "DACA built on silence" and "loud and proud" shot to the top of trending lists. But Crockett didn't stop there. She pivoted, widening the frame of her response to expose the deeper fault lines between her and Melania. She accused the former First Lady of perpetuating a culture where women were valued for elegance over influence, for appearance over action. "This isn't a runway," Jasmine said. "This is Congress. And if raising my voice makes me foolish, then I'll be the loudest fool in the building until justice is served." The room erupted with murmurs, journalists scribbling frantically as the soundbite echoed across feeds within seconds. The sharpness of her words tapped directly into the public mood. Supporters celebrated her defiance as the authentic voice of a generation tired of being dismissed or belittled. Critics, on the other hand, accused her of grandstanding, of exploiting a personal jab for political gain. Yet even they could not deny the effectiveness of her performance. Cable news channels cut live to her statement, dissecting every syllable, every hand gesture, every deliberate pause. Analysts called it a masterclass in flipping the narrative. Meanwhile, Melania's camp maintained a stone-cold silence. No rebuttals, no clarifications. And that silence made Jasmine's fiery words echo even louder. For once, it seemed as though the former First Lady was trapped. Any move she made would risk inflaming the conflict further. By the end of the day, what had started as a single offhand comment had crystallized into something larger, a symbolic clash between two opposing archetypes of womanhood in American public life. Crockett wasn't just responding, she was rewriting the rules of engagement. The ripple effect from Crockett's fiery press statement did not subside overnight. Instead, it intensified. By the next morning, headlines screamed with bold variations of the same theme. Crockett claps back. Silence versus strength. When voices collide. It was clear that the narrative was no longer confined to a single spat between two public figures. It had ballooned into a cultural moment. Talk radio seized on it, with conservative hosts mocking Crockett as overly dramatic, while progressive commentators hailed her as the embodiment of fearless truth-telling. Every outlet, from cable pundits to digital influencers, wanted a piece of the story. Inside Congress, however, the atmosphere was less about entertainment and more about tension. Lawmakers whispered in corridors, strategists analyzed polling numbers, and staffers refreshed social media feeds obsessively to track which side was winning the digital battle. Crockett's team, buoyed by the viral traction, leaned into the momentum. They released a sharp-edged video montage within hours, splicing together Melania's original comment with Jasmine's searing rebuttal, overlaid with text that read, "Strong women don't whisper." It was political theater at its finest, and it worked. The video racked up millions of views before lunchtime, cementing Crockett's role as the central voice in the drama. Meanwhile, Melania Trump's silence continued to intrigue the public. Was it strategic? Was she rattled? Or was she simply choosing not to dignify the conflict with further words? The vacuum of her response created room for speculation. Some of her allies insisted privately that she had no interest in trading insults, while others fretted that Jasmine's attacks were leaving scars on her public image. Regardless of intent, the absence of a counterpunch only magnified Crockett's sound bites. What made this stage of the confrontation particularly explosive was the way it blurred the line between politics and personal conflict. Commentators began framing it as more than just a disagreement about rhetoric. It became a clash of identities, a reflection of what America expected from women in power. One camp cheered for elegance, restraint, and grace. The other rallied behind volume, authenticity, and raw defiance. Both images carried weight, but only one was trending. By the end of the day, Jasmine Crockett had transformed what could have been a fleeting insult into a sustained narrative. The headlines were no longer asking what Melania had said. They were asking what Jasmine would say next. As the media storm carried into another day, the battle between Jasmine Crockett and Melania Trump shifted from raw insult to full-blown cultural spectacle. Jasmine's message was no longer just a rebuttal. It had become a banner under which her supporters rallied. On college campuses, student groups organized impromptu rallies where they projected her quotes on giant screens, chanting about the power of refusing silence. Late-night comedians highlighted the clash as the perfect metaphor for America's struggle. Authenticity versus elegance. Confrontation versus composure. Every outlet, from cable pundits to digital influencers, wanted a piece of the story. Beyond the memes, the clash revealed something deeper about the moment. For years, political fights centered on policy, taxes, healthcare, foreign affairs. Now, tone and performance took center stage. Jasmine embodied this shift. Her fiery rejection of Melania's dismissive jab spoke to a nation exhausted by scripted speeches and hungry for unfiltered voices. Critics accused her of exploiting outrage, but even they admitted she had seized the spotlight with skill. Meanwhile, Melania's silence became a puzzle. Was it dignity or weakness? Allies said she was above the fray, yet her refusal to answer seemed to validate Jasmine's claim that elegance was being used to silence strong women. In private, strategists worried restraint looked like retreat. The more Melania avoided the fight, the more Crockett's words echoed. By day's end, it was clear the feud had grown far beyond personal insult. It had turned into cultural currency, a symbolic choice for Americans. Jasmine, the unapologetic voice of defiance, or Melania, the stoic figure of restraint. Either way, the spectacle had locked the nation's attention. By the sixth day of headlines, the feud between Jasmine Crockett and Melania Trump had grown beyond either woman's intentions. What began as a single cutting remark now stood as shorthand for how America discussed women, power, and voice itself. Pundits noted how quickly the narrative shifted away from policy and toward personality. Jasmine Crockett, sharp-tongued and unapologetic, became a symbol of politics shaped by viral clips and bold defiance. Melania Trump, poised and restrained, represented the counter-image. Power expressed through silence and composure. On college campuses, professors used the feud as a case study. Students compared the coverage across networks, examining how tone defined public reaction. Online, hashtags multiplied. Stand with Jasmine trended alongside Grace with Melania. Each side insisted its figure represented modern womanhood, unapologetic versus elegant, raw honesty versus dignified quiet. The divide mirrored America's broader polarization, red against blue, confrontation against restraint. In Washington, lawmakers scrambled. Some feared the feud distracted from urgent policy battles, while others saw a chance to boost their standing. Allies of Jasmine applauded her courage to fight back against belittlement, citing her as proof that directness was a strength. Conservative commentators praised Melania's calm, insisting dignity should not be mistaken for weakness. The Capitol buzzed with speculation. Was this a passing story, or had it become a cultural marker that would define debates about women in public life? What stood out most was how completely the conflict had transcended its spark. Jasmine leaned into her role, doubling down in interviews with provocative language designed to resonate with those who valued blunt truth. Melania, still silent, let her absence speak volumes, her composure functioning as both shield and target. The standoff, unresolved, had already carved itself deep into the national conversation. As the media frenzy entered its closing act, the feud between Jasmine Crockett and Melania Trump had already reshaped the political conversation in ways few could ignore. Commentators across the spectrum admitted this was not just another viral spat, but a moment that exposed raw nerves in American culture. Jasmine's refusal to let the insult fade into background noise forced a reckoning. What counted as strength in politics today? Was it the ability to confront disrespect head-on, or to remain untouched by provocation? The answers varied, but the question itself dominated television panels, radio shows, and kitchen table debates. In living rooms, Americans picked sides with unusual passion. Supporters of Jasmine saw her as the voice they had been waiting for, a politician unafraid to reject the veneer of politeness that so often concealed inequality. To them, she embodied the courage of speaking out when silence might have been easier. Meanwhile, Melania's defenders framed her composure as a higher form of strength, insisting that refusing to engage with hostility was the ultimate show of control. In this divide, the nation revealed its own struggle. Should leaders be fiery and direct, or calm and restrained? Behind the scenes, strategists plotted how to harness the energy. Jasmine's camp began to organize digital campaigns, turning her defiance into a movement. Melania's allies, more guarded, tried to shift focus back to policy, but found the story clung stubbornly to every interview and press mention. What had begun as a single sharp remark now existed as cultural shorthand, an episode symbolizing the constant tension between authenticity and image in American life. As the cameras dimmed and the news cycle threatened to turn, one truth remained. The Crockett-Melania clash had captured something essential about this political moment. It was raw, polarizing, and unforgettable. And for Jasmine, it was a reminder that her voice, amplified by millions, could no longer be dismissed. And if you want to keep following the twists and turns of these battles shaping America's future, make sure to subscribe, because this is only the beginning.